I'd like to welcome everybody for this partnership panel discussion, which was actually instigated by Grameen Foundation, who are launching a campaign which is to encourage male champions for women's inclusion. I think this is the idea behind it, but Zubaida will talk more about it. It does resonate very well with us because we work at Giving Women to ensure our work is directed to support the women in the most underserved communities in every part of their life, from financial inclusion to health to education to women's rights we do the whole thing. But we know that if we really want systemic change to happen, the whole community needs to be part of these changes. And so when Zubaida and Amelia came to us, we thought, okay, this would be great. We love to organize panel discussions and really bring out, the challenges. We don't look for agreement. We like a little bit of controversy, a little bit of tension, because we feel that really gets the ideas out there and really gets us to think about things in a very profound way. If we all agree, it's not exciting. So I would like to introduce our favorite moderator, Katharina Wickrama-Samara, because she is the one that always brings out those wonderful issues and creates those moments where we have aha moments of, well, I didn't think of it in that way. Yeah, really, we need to think about it in from another perspective. And that's why we're here. We're not here just to be in agreement, but really to push work as far as we can. So I would like to welcome our panelists. It's wonderful to have Yves with us once again. Yves is an old friend of Giving Women, has spoken at several conferences for us and panels, and it's really nice to have old friends. Wessel from Equimundo, and of course Zubaida and Alfred from Grameen. So I pass it on to Katharina, the jubilant Katharina, who is going to a drumming band practice after this. I'm revealing everything.
Yes. Thank you, Atalanti. Atalanti knows I absolutely love being part of anything to do with Giving Women. I love this community. So I'm really delighted and grateful that you've invited me this evening. And I'm going to make a confession. This is a subject that really, really interests me. I've been in philanthropy for about over a decade. And one of the questions that always comes to my mind is about why we're going to fund men's work, working with men, when, we're trying to work to change the lives of women. So it's actually the perfect learning opportunity for me, and I'm really thrilled to be part of it. But before, I'm not going to introduce all the panelists first. I'd actually like to start by introducing Zubaida, who is the CEO of Grameen Foundation. Zubaida will be well known to many of you in that role, and Grameen has made, as most of you know, a huge mark and impact in the world, specifically for people living in extremely difficult situations globally. So Zubaida, can I just start by inviting you to introduce yourself and tell us about Grameen and specifically about this piece of work. Thanks.
Thank you, Atalanti, Katharina, and all of the Giving Women group that wants to listen about this topic. As Katharina said, I'm Zubaida Bai. I've been the president and CEO of Grameen Foundation for a little over 2 years now. However, Grameen is really excited about celebrating 27 years. And over the last 27 years, we are very humbled and proud to say that we've impacted 25 million lives as Grameen Foundation. But despite all the progress that we've made, we continue to see the barriers that limit the potential of women. And even today, the numbers are definitely a fact to state that over 1 billion women today remain excluded from the financial systems and many more systems that govern our lives every day. We have a new strategy in Grameen that we launched a couple of months ago called Invest in Her Power. And a core part of this strategy is the HER framework, which stands for Holistic Enhanced Resilience at its core. We are now focused on creating pathways that work at the intersection of financial inclusion, gender, and climate that go beyond access to capital. If I can get all of you to just imagine for a second the barriers that women face in their lives. If we can think of a rural woman in Uganda who works in her fields every day for hours, she works in her household doing her daily chores and the maintenance needed to keep her family running. She also has to walk miles every week to collect water. And she is at a point in life where she thinks, well, if I sell some crops, and can I imagine starting a small business to do that? The fact is that she does not have a bank account, and hence she does not have access to credit. If we can imagine her excitement when she hears about an opportunity to open a bank account with a small line of credit from her phone. And now suddenly a world of opportunities open for her. She can buy equipment, she can buy supplies, she's able to start selling to her community as well. Not only that, because she's a woman, she's also starting to think about, can I save for my children's education? How can I get this business to grow? Now, when all this is happening, imagine that her husband decides that he does not want her to hold on to her income. He feels a little threatened and maybe excluded from her newfound economic independence. What happens to her business when she needs a little bit more money now and she needs more support from her family? And no financial provider is willing to take risk on her to give her access to capital. And even if they do, the interest rates are going to be about 40 to 70%. What happens when she has no access to education or training to move her business to the next level? This is where Grameen's strategy comes into place. Our strategy is not about giving someone a loan. It's not about her having a bank account. It's about opening doors for this woman that have been systemically shut for her for centuries. The truth is that we need the strength and the economic power of women to solve some of our greatest problems. We know for certain that the systems that govern our lives, everything from finance to agriculture to health, are not built for women. At the current rates, the World Economic Forum states that it will take us about 128 years to achieve full gender parity. But if we can bridge that gender gap, it will contribute $28 trillion to the global economy within 1 year, an amount that can end poverty in our lifetimes. Our new strategy recognizes the power of women and recognizes that the world needs this power for it to survive as a society and as a planet. We really need to make sure that women are not excluded from the systems, and an important piece of this work includes partnering with men in their lives. So what is the Holistic Enhanced Resilience Framework and how do men play a role in it? The framework is built on 5 pillars. The first one is to start mobilizing local actors, looking for local community agents, ensuring that we identify the right financial partners for them. Everything we do begins from bottom up, and there's a grassroots approach, and hence finding the right partners at the right place is essential to our first step of mobilizing local actors. Our second step is about our work at the household level. Here we want to ensure that the male spouse becomes a spark for change that strengthens the economic power of a woman and their families. We want to ensure that these men look at women as independent financial contributors, don't feel threatened by them, but see them as partners, and partners that can walk with them out of poverty. The third intervention is where we leverage education, technology, climate-smart agriculture, training, and all the skills that are needed to grow and launch a business. The fourth intervention is built on our history of access to financial services and a robust network of partners who provide capital. And a very important piece is reduction of interest rates and removing the perception through power dynamics training at the institution level to ensure that they start believing that women are not risky investments. The final pillar is where we work with the local market. We want to ensure that the network around a woman sees her as equal and also sees her as a solution to strengthen the economic power of the local economy. Ultimately, the HER framework will reach women in their homes and in their communities. And by partnering with men, we will strengthen these families while increasing their economic power and resilience, both from a financial and a climate perspective. To see this long-term change realized, we have started with men, primarily because we believe that they are the change agents and they are the ones that feel threatened at this point. So we've introduced a new program called the $10 Spark Initiative, which is a short-term intervention aimed at reconfiguring power in the household, in the community, and in the local economies, with the goal of reaching 10,000 men by the end of the year. I'll stop there and see how we can move forward from here and hear from our other colleagues on the panel as well.
Thank you so much, Zubaida. That was actually really useful, and you managed to cram a huge amount of information into a short time, and in fact answer some of the questions that I already had in my head. So thank you very much. You talked about the barriers, you talked about why it's important to engage with men. So Alfred, can we turn to you firstly? Sorry, I'm not introducing all the panelists. I hope that's okay with everybody. We are joined by Yves Moury from Fundacion Capital and his colleague, Maria Jose Escobar. We're also joined by Alfred Yeboah from Grameen and Wessel Berg from Equimundo, and all of them are working actively in their particular organizations on promoting gender justice through different mechanisms, but all of them have got lengthy years of experience working with men on that issue as well. I'm so sorry for that little aside. I'm going to go back to you, Alfred. Thank you. Can you so Zubaida did describe to us why engaging with men is important, but could you talk to us about this particular campaign? So that was, she talked about the why, and could you focus on the who? So who is it targeted at and who's going to deliver the program? And then the how. So what are the interventions that you see will change the harmful social norms, and how does this program with men leverage solutions that, for example, women have talked about?
Yeah, thank you very much, Katharina. So this intervention or campaign that Zubaida talked about is targeted at couples. So it sees men as allies and not a problem. So again, it's not an intervention just focusing on men only, no, but rather looks at it at engaging, couples, and then seeing how that could strengthen our already operational financial inclusion work at the communities where we work. So these intra-household community dialogues basically includes facilitation of dialogues with couples in small groups on topics that relate to gender norms or dynamics that impede women's full economic participation, and also engage male partners and family members as allies of women's rights and businesses. Again, the dialogues does provide a space for women entrepreneurs, their spouses, male and female community leaders, religious leaders, and other opinion leaders to collectively, very important, collectively explore through positive masculinity principles. So by collectively identifying levers of change and also rewiring their thinking about shifting and sharing power through these dialogues, we are seeing how men and other community stakeholders appreciate the full extent to which traditional gender norms and gender-based violence affect women's ability to start and grow successful businesses and also participate in income generation activities. So all in all, I would say that, basically the dialogues are geared towards realizing how gender-based violence affects women entrepreneurs and how these violence can also often be an unintended consequences as a result of our many economic strengthening activities, and also importantly, how men and women can work as allies to overcome these challenges to these economic strengthening initiatives. So very crucial part of our systems change approach are these gender dialogues. And it is basically community facilitators, community members who are respected and also are trusted by community folks who are trained to facilitate these dialogues at the community level. And again, to your question in terms of, programs that we are able to leverage that women basically propose. So as I mentioned, the dialogues are not a standalone intervention, but rather seamlessly tie into our existing financial inclusion programs, especially for women, where we are linking them to access safe and affordable credit. But then doing so, again, as I said, in a safe manner such that the men are not behind and controlling what those loans are, for example, used for. So basically getting the men to stand with the women, accessing this credit to grow and sustain their businesses every step of the way, and ensuring that they are in fact co-investing into the businesses of these women. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. So many questions popped into my mind while you were speaking, but I really would like to bring everybody else in. So I'm going to come back to you throughout with some questions. But I'm actually, so I should tell everybody that's participating, I've had the advantage of talking to most of the people on the panel before, so I know a little bit more about what they do. So actually, Yves, can I go to you? Because when we were speaking, I think it was yesterday or the day before, one of the things that struck me about your program at Fundacion Capital is that the programs are kind of holistic. There's beyond dialogue, there's a whole kind of wraparound piece. And I wanted to talk to you about, or ask you to tell us a little bit about the work of your organization, and then tell us how the programs that you do, specifically with couples, for example, in financial inclusion, what is it that goes beyond dialogue that you see as important to success?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Yves Moury. I'm the founder and CEO of Fundacion Capital. Fundacion Capital is a social enterprise. We work on systems change, meaning that we are not interested in accompanying 10 or 20,000 people out of poverty, but we want to change the obscene systems producing poverty. It's easy to say, more complicated to do, but we work simultaneously with very remote and extreme poor communities, and also striking deals with government and improving public policies. So we work on both sides. Basically, we work on what we call economic citizenship, that is accompanying poor, basically women. We work with 80% women, 20% men, accompanying those users, helping them to build assets. And we do in order to reach their full economic potential, and then being considered and seen as full-fledged citizens. Reason why we speak about economic citizenship. It's not about giving green cards to Mexicans in the US. So we've got 3 pillars of intervention. We work heavily on financial inclusion, basically helping poor women open bank accounts, normal bank accounts, in order to save. We used to say that a woman's saving is a woman's saving lives, and we deeply believe that. We work on economic inclusion, obviously, all this at scale. We've got several graduation programs, for instance, for the ones who know that. And we work on digital inclusion. We're going to speak about digital tools we use in order to go to scale. again, if you want scale, there are only two pillars: working with governments to improve public policies, because public policies are massive by definition, and using massively digital tools because it reduces costs. And we reach almost everybody. I say almost, not exactly everyone. We still need human touch when it's in some spaces. But anyway, we've been reaching and accompanying maybe between 6 and 7 million poor women in 19 countries in 15 years. We are not yet to 27 years, as Zubaida said about Grameen Foundation. But we work on similar issues, basically. Poverty, extreme poverty, financial inclusion, building assets, building revenues. That's exactly what we do. And then we realized along those 15 years of work that all this is not enough. We need to challenge or influence social norms, in particular those norms excluding women or complicating their lives or exposing them to violence. In particular, we focus on gender-based violence. In Latin America in particular, it's a huge issue, a real huge issue, and the care economy. We focus on a transformative approach to tackle those social norms at individual, community, and institutional level. Again, easy to say, more complicated to do, but we'll tell you how we try to do that in a moment, I suppose. Thank you. It was a short presentation.
So when you talk about those programs, you see all of that work of community work, government engagement, addressing public policy, building assets, accompanying users and so forth, and influencing social norms as all sort of part of a package that works together. Is that what so I see Maria Jose, you're nodding. So
Maria Jose, your turn.
Sorry, Maria Jose. Maria Jose, can I just ask you, because this particular program, $10 Spark Igniting Transformation Initiative, is about exiting poverty as a couple. That's correct, Alfred? Right, cool. One of the things I've noticed is that programs working with men to change gender norms often have another goal. So exiting poverty, improving fathering skills, increasing family access to the economy so that women have more time to engage in income generation, for example. And Zubaida talked about the importance of that with this figure of the $28 trillion that could, be added to the economies. Sometimes that feels kind of transactional or instrumentalizing of women to me. And I wonder, is it always necessary to link changing harmful gender norms to a specific outcome that actually benefits men or the broader community in order for there to be uptake? And if that's the case, why do you think that is?
Thank you, Katharina. Well, first, we celebrate these kind of initiatives because along our journey, we have realized that, as Yves was saying, we have to actually influence social norms to guarantee that women do benefit from our programs. And we have identified that the main barrier to achieve this are gender norms that we all reproduce, including women and men. We have seen that women's often lack of self-confidence because we have reproduced social norms that tell us that men are leaders and men are the main characters of public and economic spaces, but we have limited women to the private within household spheres. This has also led us to, for example, for women to experience extreme poverty, time poverty, which leaves them no enough time and energy to be part of our programs or to actually engage into other opportunities. And not mentioning also gender-based violence that limit women in every sphere. So we believe in Fundación Capital that we cannot merely see women as agents of poverty or agents of programs, but that we have to promote a narrative that frames what the work we're doing with men also within women, because as you may know, only 1% of ODA, specifically targeting, for example, violence against women and girls, goes to this kind of themes. So we do believe that we have to engage men as allies, but we have to be careful of not reproducing the superwoman image where we burden women with more work and with more time constraints by having to access to these programs. We do believe we have to engage men as allies, and to make it possible, we do it from an aspirational approach, because we don't want men to feel repelled for our programs. We want them to be actual agents and participants of them. So we mainly use different contents, both in, for example, application or materials, using gamification, relatable scenarios, and practical exercises. And for this matter, we have also developed our own app aimed at changing social norms so that the content actually feels approachable and fosters curiosity and engagement rather than resistance from men. So yes, we believe we should work with men as allies, but we cannot forget that our main goal is to achieve women's economic empowerment, because unfortunately, women are the most and disproportionately affected of all the issues that we're working to address, mainly poverty in this case.
Thanks.
Katharina, may I take 2 or 3 examples of what
Please go ahead.
Maria
Yes.
Jose just said? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you're the
No,
moderator.
please go ahead. Yes, yes.
Just a few examples. When Maria Jose speaks about lack of self-confidence as an obstacle, after working with women, helping them open a bank account, a lot of them changed drastically. I remember one telling me, "We were sleeping beauties, and now we are a bank account. We live." That's self-confidence, isn't it? Another example is when we speak about gender-based violence. My husband doesn't beat me anymore now that I have a bank account with my sole signature. Fantastic results. I mean, we lowered, and we have RCT proving it, we lowered 50% the level of violence within the family with those programs, just opening bank accounts to women. It's as simple as that. And another one telling me, I remember, between my bank account and my husband, I choose the bank account. This is to show you that all those obstacles are not, we can minimize them, we can lower them, we can destroy them with appropriate tools. And then, Katharina, if you allow me 2 more minutes or 1 more minute, I would love to challenge a little bit this idea that you expressed, that having first an objective of reducing or getting rid of poverty might be a way to instrumentalization of women. I would challenge this idea because, you know, you have no equality in poverty. All those, those objectives are intertwined. I mean, poverty, building more assets and income, women empowered, less violence, changing of cultural norms. All this is intertwined. You cannot say this objective comes before or after the other one. It works all together. More money means more power. Women with more money have got automatically more power. I'm not sure that we are instrumentalizing women by saying that this program, this initiative of Spark Igniting Transformative Initiative, because it's about poverty, I'm not sure that it automatically instrumentalizes women. Frankly, I don't know. I don't think so. We need to engage men as allies. It's indispensable if you want to dismantle those harmful norms that persist, you know, because there is a lack of information, because of customs, because of self-image, masculinity, and that's a huge issue. We could talk about this for years. And the unawareness of negative effects for men in particular. They are not aware that their their masculinity is detrimental to themselves in different ways.
Okay.
Sorry, Katharina, I wanted to add this.
No, thank you. That's that's very interesting. Thank you. Wessel, can I come to you? Yves just referred to a program that reduced violence in the home by 50%. And when we spoke, you spoke of another program that had done a similar thing, which that's huge, statistically huge and really significant. But my question is, when you're implementing these programs and talking about the benefits of gender equality for men, because Yves also just raised that, that men don't know how harmful patriarchy is to them and so forth. How do you talk to men about those issues while at the same time holding them accountable for the inequality and violence that the women in their families might experience? These are programs that are designed often for conversations with men. And I'm just interested in how those conversations reflect the balance of positive change while also recognizing that things in the home need to change and that those participants are actually accountable for that change.
Thanks so much, Katharina, and thank you to Grameen and Giving Women for the invitation. I agree, that's a really good point. And I think we've built up some, as a movement working to combat gender-based violence, we've built up some literacy about telling men what not to do. We've built less competence in telling men what to start doing as positive contributions. And I think I agree, money is power, is important. In addition to that, and parallel to that, not contradicting that, is the value of understanding care. And I think as default, when the social norms dictate that women are default caregivers, and caregivers understand the value of care. All of us know of multiple programs where funding runs out, but the care workers continue doing the care because they understand the value of that, as one example. So I think the sell to men is, in addition to saying stop the violence, there's a sell to understand the value of care. And one way to do that is to actually practically engage men in care, to actually do that work. And, I'm very particular not to only speak about caring about others or caring about something, because men do very much care about others, but to actually do the drudgery and the hard and routine work. And then to understand the value of that after having done that. So in answering your question, I think it's both a shift into doing something new and positive, in addition to being very clear about the harm that should stop. And I think in terms of male allyship, we often overlook the allyship that happens outside the workplace, in the home. And I would contend that a man doing care work, contributing to a gender equal share of invisible labor, is being a male ally. And I think that's an important dimension of the work. So as you say, we've tested interventions with rigorous evaluations that have shown that this is possible, but it does require quite a comprehensive set of conditions. So let me stop there for a moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Wessel. I'm gonna ask you for a bit more detail, Alfred, because I'm still interested in this question about how the men that are part of these programs are encouraged to be safe in the home. We know, for example, that 1/3 of women in Ghana have experienced or are experiencing intimate partner abuse, which includes physical, emotional, and economic abuse. So that means that technically, just statistically, about 3,000 of the participants in this program will be or have been at some stage abusers. That's just a statistic. When you get on a bus, and in Switzerland, 1 in 5 of the blokes on the bus must be statistically abusers, because that's the statistics in Geneva, for example. So Wessel talked a little bit about that accountability piece, but how does this program work to, I can't say ensure, but work towards protecting the women in the families who might be gaslit by, for example, no, I went to this workshop and they said I should behave like this. Well, she doesn't know he's been told at that workshop. So how is that program responding to that protective need? And I see Zubaida has her hand up. Is that because you want to answer this question? Yeah, okay. Alfred, sorry, I'm gonna let your boss answer.
I have to step out in a few minutes, but just to Wessel's point and kind of your question, I believe there are two important pieces of statistic that are important to this conversation. The first one being that what Grameen has seen and recognized is that 70 to 80% of all gender-based violence happens because of financial reasons, right? So finance, access to capital is very, very important when it comes to that. The second piece of information to add to what Wessel was saying in terms of the invisible care economy work, and the statistic that we have is to say that every single day, the unpaid labor of care that women provide globally, that includes all the women in this call as well, is about 10.5 billion hours a day, right? So we really understand the scale of this problem on an everyday basis. So I feel like those two important data points will add to what Alfred can say about how this initiative enables families to move forward. Over to you, Alfred.
Yeah, no, so I'll start from where Zubaida has ended. So yes, it is true that, household finances is one of the source of conflicts. And clearly, in my mind, I was even thinking that when it comes to physical sexual abuse, compared to financial abuse, that was on the rise, but that is not the case. A lot of households are having conflict just because of how, finances are managed. And again, our approach is to, in the first instance, have conversation with men only. But in a follow-on conversation, so it's basically to soften the ground, right? Have conversation with men only. Very uncomfortable conversations around promoting joint household decision-making. By the second instance, we have the spouses of these men join them in a follow-on conversation. So that is where the dialogues are had with these couples, so that one, they are able to develop what we call an emergency fund. So that is one of the practical ways by which we are resolving or basically reducing the incidence of some of these violence. So most of the households or the couples involved in these dialogues have in place what we call an emergency fund. And this fund can be in the form of cash, some as a store in livestock, like a wealth in livestock, some in jewelry. They come in different forms. And these households or couples are able to rely on them in times of uncertainties, in a way building their resilience. So that as a starting point alone is getting the couples to talk. If we can set up an emergency fund, then what else can we do together jointly as a couple? So for us, that is an entry point. And we are seeing others go beyond these emergency funds to basically develop an action plan in terms of their household finances and how they intend to allocate the resources. We've had a little bit of tension in terms of prioritization of what the household income is used for, but at least a good starting point, right? The men would want to put their priorities on top of the women. That is okay, but at least getting the couples to start talking, having a conversation, and the women having a voice, because now they are contributing to household income, for us is one of the big steps. And again, the men that are taking part in these dialogues are accountable for each other. So if you are a man and you have agreed to be part of these conversations and you are doing otherwise, other men in the community will make sure that you are called, you are basically, put in your tracks or basically prompted to do the right things, because again, they are supposed to be serving as role models. And these are some of the foundational pillars that basically underscore why our approach is very sustainable, because it is owned by the men, it is owned by the couples, and it is basically they deciding that this is what jointly we can do for our household. So just wanted to chip in that. And in all of these, we are enabling the men to be able to confront their own vulnerabilities. That's a point I want to make very clear. Sometimes you are very uncomfortable around some of these conversations, but the way the conversations are framed is such that it creates a safe space, at least for the men to confront their own vulnerability in all of this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alfred. Maria Jose, when we talked earlier, you mentioned, I think almost as a throwaway line, that changing gender norms takes a long time and isn't always successful. How do you know a program like this has been, working with men, has been successful? What do you use as the indicators of success?
Okay, thank you, Katharina. First, I just want to mention like a brief answer to what they have been mentioned. And I think that men definitely have to be allies in women's economic empowerment, but in terms of care, they must be responsible adults, not allies, because that's just the responsibility for being part of a household. So just that little comment, I think it's crucial. And also, we do have to take into account physical or sexual abuse, but we also have to take into account emotional, psychological, and of course, economic violence ways of manifesting as well. So in terms of realizing the effects, we are able to see them in two ways. The first immediate way is we start to see that women are no longer getting or falling behind, because we have seen, for example, that the main cause of women being left behind in our programs is actually gender-based violence situations, because their couples are telling them not to go to those workshops, or that the work that they have been doing or the knowledge they have been acquiring, it's not enough and does not count at all. So this is like the first way that we can see these results tangible. But also, for example, and as a question I saw in the chat box, they are no longer feeling backlashed for their community when they decide to step aside their normal care or domestic responsibilities to actually engaging in economic activities. And we also can see men being more involved in their activities and also in our workshops. They start to make space for women and let them talk in decision-making spaces when we before couldn't see it. And also, in the long run, we're able to see and measure these changes through a variety of indicators that we in Fundación Capital have that has 5 dimensions that we measure to know more about how gender norms are being transformed. So we have dimensions on time use, agency, self-efficacy, but also into perceptions around gender roles and gender-based violence situations. So this is the way we measure it, and we surely have a more concrete example of what we do in this matter, if you want.
Yeah, Katharina, may I?
Yes, please, yes.
When we said that there are backlashes, of course there are, and it takes time. In fact, my belief is that the length of a project is far from being insufficient in order to change behaviors and norms. I mean, let's be rational. It takes a generation. In fact, we should work at school also with kids in order to start changing norms. But so let's not be stupid. We know it takes time. We know that an aspirational approach for male is a lengthy process. We need them to be exposed to positive messages for years and years and years. It takes time. Reason why we've been working on different digital tools, as Maria Jose just told you, showing positive scenarios. We have an application, an app, for instance, called Igualdad. It's a mix of app and equality, you know, speaking especially about this, norms. And in that app, you see a white man, a big guy with muscles, you know, doing the dishes, for instance. That kind of messages are the ones we want to promote progressively. But it should be aspirational. Don't confront men directly, saying you're bad guys and you're the bad ones. It doesn't work like that. And we know that. It doesn't work like that. We may dream of a better solution or a quicker solution, but it doesn't work like that. Then, if we speak about having impact as quickly as possible, to my taste, it takes years, we need to measure impact. How do we measure impact? Because it's changing social norms is something complicated to measure. We've been, and we do work with a special provider of that kind of services called Decodis, for those who know them, Dariel Collins. She developed, and we have been applying her tools to decode information in the voices of women that we are following. Decode information in their voices. It's a special software that try to unearth emotions behind words, you know? And that's the way we have, one of the way we have to be sure that what a woman says corresponds to what she thinks. It's not easy. For instance, when we ask to a woman, do you agree that your husband may check your cell phone? Surprisingly enough, a lot say, yes, we do agree, but but maybe they don't think, they think otherwise. So when we talk to them with WhatsApp and with the special software, we can understand if this is really true or not really, or she's afraid of telling what she thinks. This is a very, very useful tool in order to know speech signals is very useful. We also use natural language processing systems to understand what women say about the accompanying process. So, yes.
Can I just interrupt you? What I like about that approach is, and it kind of goes to my earlier accountability question, it's the measure isn't what the man says about how he's changed. The measure is actually what the woman in his life says about how he's changed.
Yes.
So for me, that's the significant accountability piece, because I can say, hey, I'm doing great. I got 100%, but you need to ask the person who corrected my paper if I actually got 100%.
Well, in fact, we've been using those tools, very sophisticated tools, just with women, but we already work on a system to use the same tools with men also, but it will be a different kind of design. So for the moment, just women, for obvious reasons, as you said. Yeah.
Thanks. Can I want to link something you also said to a question to Wessel, because one of you, I can't remember now which one it was, I wrote a note, talked about, how long this kind of change takes. And so I'm interested to know, Wessel, from your experience, how programs can promote intergenerational change, because we know it's one thing to change how one guy in one family feels, but Zubaida started by saying this is about systems change. We're not changing systems if we aren't thinking into the next generation and the one after. So can you talk to us a little bit about how programs like this can promote intergenerational change?
To whom the question? Sorry. Please.
You're sure, Katharina, no problem. So there's two, just two comments on the conversation we just had. In our International Men and Gender Equality Survey, done across 33 countries, we also asked women for collateral information about men's behavior. So we didn't just ask men, we asked women also about men's time use and use of violence. And as you say, men tend to represent ourselves better than the reality. So it's important to get that collateral information. The same with the RCT we did on behavior change in parenting, where we did see a reduction in violence reported by women about the men in their lives who had participated in the intervention in Rwanda. So just to come to your question about the intergenerational change, there's 2 points that I'd like to mention. The first one is in a very small sample of a project here in a corner of South Africa, there's a project where men are working as early childhood development practitioners. They are hosting schools for children out of their own. And I was involved in a documentary about the project. And what struck me was that this is about a group of about 20 men. Without fail, all of them said, "I'm inspired by my mother." So these are men who are in their 20s. And, as I said to you in our preparation, I've always thought about intergenerational transfer of violence and intergenerational transfer of care in single-sex lanes, that boys copy men and girls copy women. But in fact, these men were copying their mothers. So, and also there's a big conversation about how are daughters affected by their fathers when they grow up. So I would just add that and throw that into the conversation about intergenerational transfer of either harmful or positive behavior, and not to limit ourselves to one gender or sex lane in that. That's my first point. The second one is that we are working deliberately with a generation of boys through our Global Boyhood Initiative. We are working with the adults around boys to help them to move beyond the gender stereotypes that remove the relationality and the compassion that they are born with. My son is 8 years old. He's deeply empathetic. He tells me what his friends' names are. He is connected to the people around him, and he cares about them. And I can see that he's moving into a world that is trying to whittle that away the older he grows, through the games that he plays, through the YouTube videos that he watches, through his friends speaking. So what we're trying to do is to get schools and parents to counter that by deliberately asking boys about the relationality in their lives. So there's lots more to say about that, but that's one way to work intergenerationally. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. It's a bit linked to that question. I'm going to actually ask Maria Jose to answer this one. I've talked to all of you about it, but so one of the things that we've seen recently in what we call Western countries, where we've had over a century of women's suffrage, we have women elected officials, women stepping into power, women running for president of major countries. Nevertheless, what we've seen is a rise of openly misogynistic, sexist, anti-rights, anti-women leadership. We've seen that recently. We've also seen a rise of the incel movement. I read an article in The Economist recently about the huge incel movement in India, where I actually thought it was a European thing, but anyway. We've also seen a huge rise of the anti-gender ideology movements, which seem to me to suggest that despite, like a century of this work, it's not sticking. So what Zubaida talked about, and many of you have talked about, the benefits of gender equality clearly benefits men and the whole community as well as economies and as well as women. So why isn't this whole concept of gender equality and gender justice sticking? And that's kind of the long-term question that Anne-Marie asked in the chat. I'm just interested, what do you think we've missed?
Well, Katharina, gender inequality persists because it is rooted into gender norms that sustain power imbalances that mainly benefit men. So those who are already in positions of privilege, we know that there are men more privileged than others concerning to other cross-cutting identities. But while they persist in a situation of privilege, it would be very difficult to change it otherwise. So they have to be actually aware of the consequences, not only as a society because they still have that privilege, but also as men themselves. How having to be seen as a strong, self-sufficient people actually harms them as men, having severe mental issues, also exposing themselves to dangerous situations, and at the end also restricting economic growth, as people were mentioning before. So I think that's the issue. They are in a position of power. Power is not easy to resign, and they are also unaware because these social norms have been founded in customs and the way we have been raised, as also Wessel was mentioning. We have to change the narrative in which we live and make men be able to see that although it allows privilege, the costs are really most expensive.
So, so you're saying that we just haven't cracked the messaging that enables men to better understand how living in a more gender equal world would make everything better for them too? It's the messaging thing, or what is it beyond that? Because Yves started by talking about your work at Fundacion Capital works about this wraparound, changing community views, government views, public policy, accompanying users, and a whole kind of, all of you have got all these other pieces going on. So the concept, we just haven't cracked the concept of privilege and power and how we shift that in thinking. Wessel, is that, or what? Yeah, do you have something you want to add? Or
Sure. So in addition to the basic idea that profit is more important than care, which centers power at the middle, if we increase care, that will be more, it will create a much more equal society if care is centered, just as a general principle, in addition to capital. So that's number one. Secondly, but while holding men accountable, I think we've underestimated the impact of the internet. And, you know, as we are now starting to see, you know, and the analogy is tobacco and smoking, is that, you know, 50 years ago, there were posters of doctors smoking. And the analogy to social media is that it's being promoted to anybody who's able to access it, whereas now we're starting to have evidence about the harmful effects of social media, particularly, you know, for adolescent girls' mental health, etc. We're starting to see some countries put policies in place that actually delay the engagement with social media as much as possible. So I think just that very idea that you can do something about how the internet is being implemented first, and secondly, starting to understand the effect it has on polarization in general, but specifically on activating harmful masculinities. You know, so the manosphere is a big deal. You know, men speaking with impunity, the incel movement. You know, we've done research on the manosphere about this in various countries, and I think it's still early days for us to start to learn what to do about it. Whether it's engaging online in a counter conversation, disrupting harmful narratives online, or simply holding internet service providers accountable for what they are allowing on their platforms. And it's very early days for that. You know, it's really new. So I think that's at the moment contributing a lot, and it is something that we unfortunately still need to learn a lot about in order to effectively engage.
Yeah, it's interesting how each kind of technological advance gives us benefits, but we often don't think about the potential harm before we jump in boots and all and get hyper excited and see how marvelous it's going to be for the world. We kind of don't put in guardrails before launching. We launch and then say, oh, whoops, the daisy. Now we have to do work on positive masculinities on the internet. We didn't have to do that 20, 30 years ago. So yeah. Can I go to you, Alfred? Maria Jose spoke about privilege and how we are able to deconstruct that. And and the others have spoken about the several programs out there that engage with men. So can you tell us, what do you think is unique about this intervention, and why are you confident that it's going to be a success?
Yeah, thank you very much, Katharina. So, I mean, to the previous question, a little input just to say that I think it has to do with how we are unpacking the messaging around how we are reconfiguring power. At the end of the day, there should be a reason why, if a man who is a power holder should share or give up some amount of power. If you're unable to paint or visualize this business case, I say business case, in terms of what is in it for me, then why should I share power, right? So I think it has to do with how we are unpacking the messaging and also the approach in terms of how we are reconfiguring power. Because in fact, the real deal is has to do with how men have the fear of losing or sharing power. At the end of the day, it's about adding more chairs to the table and not taking chairs from the table, around the table, right? So in terms of the uniqueness of our approach, I would say that, these dialogues that I mentioned that I had with, men exclusively and in the follow-up with couples, basically is tied with our financial inclusion initiative. And it is unique in the sense that the power to change a course of action is at the household or community level. And that power to change a course of action in terms of our approach is in the hands of the couple. In fact, they make their own decisions guided through the dialogues by alternating between small daily decisions and larger stories of success by navigating their own local context. Again, by the end of the dialogues, what we are seeing is that couples are developing their own action plans, describing very simple activities they can take, as well as a set of goals that support women in their local community so that they are able to overcome the barriers they face to increasing their incomes. And then finally, the community-based facilitators do have a standing agreement with the couples who participate in these dialogues in terms of follow-up schedule. So we've seen situations where the facilitators actually follow up to check on how well the couples are doing with their own action plans. And they go through a process we call adoption observation. That is a joint assessment process where the facilitators and the couples actually assess how well they are doing in terms of their action plans. And in very few occasions, we've seen the facilitators work with the couples to put in place a remedial action to get them on track. So basically, it's more about starting with the low-hanging fruit. And as I mentioned, almost about 95% of participants in Ghana and Nigeria who are participating in this intervention have in place an emergency fund. And for us, that's a good entry point to build off on. Thank you.
Can I just ask for some clarity? You said that there's some follow-up afterwards, but how long does that follow? Because at the end of 6 months, they can say, this has worked really well, but I don't know, 6 months later, if it's forgotten, or a year later. So for how long do you follow?
Yeah, so it's not fixed. Again, as I said, the timeline set of follow-up is an agreement between the facilitators and the couples. In some instances, we've seen 3 weeks after the second dialogue have been had with the couple. So the first one is with the men only, and then the second dialogue happens typically 4 weeks after the first one with the men only. So after the 4th week, where the couples actually are engaged in the dialogues, 3 weeks after, then the follow-on monitoring, visit starts. In some cases, it is 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Again, we do not want this to be forced. We want the couples themselves to be comfortable that, you know what, give us this time, and we are sure by the time you visit us, we would have figured out something that we can show. In some cases, we've had couples actually show evidence of the man going with the spouse to open a mobile money wallet in the name of the spouse. And this does not happen, right? And in some households, the men have actually contributed financially into the mobile money wallet of their spouses as a way of contributing to their businesses. So the evidence abounds, and it's at the, you know, basically at the convenience of the household in terms of what works for them. Thank you.
I'm not sure how comfy I feel about that whole convenience of the household, because that usually means convenience of the men. But I mean, I'm not part of this, so I'm sure all the studies gone into that. But that's a very interesting point. I think we should go to questions because we're already a bit over. And I know, Kathleen, you've been managing the questions for me.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few. I'm just trying to, because some of them are sort of commentaries and so forth. I think also generally even wanting to hear maybe about, you know, any backlash in these programs, you know, and any sort of resistance, and also just noticing, how do you convince the men, you know, are they sort of, are these people that are men that are going in there already quite willingly or unwillingly, and how is that transforming, you know, the transformation effect? I think that's what you're probably trying to get to, Sophie, in your question there. You know, can they really change?
What I was trying to get at is the men that are part of your program, are they those that are already more open to the whole thing, or do you really manage to, you know, have men that are very recalcitrant and then just, you know, change their mind? I mean, it's difficult to measure, but I'm wondering, because some men will be more on board with it from the start than others.
Yeah, if I may. So that's a good one. So in terms of our approach, our inaugural group of men have been men that are willing and able to change, right? So start with the early adopters and use them as a body of evidence, right, to positively influence other men. So in Nigeria and Kano State, we started off with communities that we knew, at least in terms of being open-minded to listen, you know, and to get the Muslim clerics or, you know, adding their voice to why certain things need to change, or they thinking about things differently. We basically start with the early adopters and we use them to then influence, you know, the bigger late adopters. Yeah.
Thanks.
May I?
Please, Yves.
Just on the same issue of backlash, when we work with women and their husbands look like against what we do with their spouses. When we started this big multi-country program on banking poor women, at the beginning, most husbands were deeply against it. Sometimes saying, I don't know, I don't want my spouse to go alone to the city to do banking operations. It's too dangerous. This is typical masculinity or patriarchy or whatever. But let's be optimistic, because after 1 year, usually 1 year, most of those men were knocking our doors saying, we also want to open a bank account. Now we understand. And we are proud of our spouses, because we realize that she's been able to save, I don't know, $200 in a year in the bank account, and it's very useful. And when we said, yes, but it's not your money, it's your spouse's money, and they answer, yes, but that's normal. So backlash at the beginning and complete change after, with exceptions, of course. But so we've got good reasons to feel optimistic. I think so. I know that some might think different, but usually men are not monsters. if I may say so. And I know here I'm putting a foot in the dangerous territory, but we spoke about that, Katharina, 2 days ago, when we are all, probably most of you, I suppose, I hope, surprised and disappointed by the US elections recently. And how come is it possible that a lot of women voted Trump and a lot of Latinos men voted Trump?
And mostly white men.
And a lot of white men. And here I'm coming to that point. Don't worry. Give me 1 minute.
Sorry.
And I suggested as an hypothesis. And again, this is a dangerous territory. Don't misunderstand me. But when men, a lot of men are bombed with excessive messages, I would say, like, you're the representative of a horrible patriarchy. You have the white privilege. You're the representative of a toxic masculinity. You're an old white male. That's me. You need to be deconstructed. If you don't want to be raped, be a lesbian, etc., etc., etc. And saying that there is a continuum between an improper, heavy gaze and rape. And when you're bombed with that kind of messages, to my taste, excessive, maybe there is a backlash. And we saw that in the US. No, don't misunderstanding. I know there is male masculinity, toxic masculinity, patriarchy, white privilege. I know all this, and it exists. But the way to present those messages probably were inadequate, usually, or are inadequate. I speak about Europe and the US. I don't know the other continents, but and also in.
Well, I'm going to take you out for a drink next time you're in Geneva, and we're going to unpack that in a bit more depth, I think.
But we need to have aspirational messages. That's all
No,
I want to say.
100% agree.
And
with
not
you.
negative ones. That's all I want to say.
100% agree with you. We need aspirational messages. That part I'll agree with.
Yeah, Katharina, very quickly, one of the backlash we had to deal with in Nigeria and Ghana were people quoting wrongly from the Bible and Quran to support why the status quo must be, women must be submissive, and interpreting it in different ways. That was one of the backlash. So our approach was get the Muslim clerics who understand the context, basically contextualizing the scriptures, right? The Quran, to then be part of the dialogues, to then speak, to put some of these, Bible, Quran quotations into perspective. So sometimes it's a real challenge dealing with some of these religious underpinnings for why people think it does support what they do. So just wanted to chip in that.
Kathleen, are there any more questions, or does anyone from the group want to just?
Yeah, I just feel, at this point, if people, want to just, unmute themselves and ask the question, and I think there, also for the speakers to just look, there's some commentaries in there about other other programs around positive parenting programs. And I think that was Anne-Marie Sevcik. And I think there's mostly commentaries. Yeah, so I think if anyone has burning questions.
I just said, this is Anne-Marie Sevcik. I want to thank you for this conversation and dialogue. I want to actually respond to Yves' comment on the last point, because I'm actually an American who also spent about 6 weeks right before the election trying to engage people to try and vote for the current vice president. And I think what you're doing is really great. I love this idea of what I've heard from the panelists in terms of child-centric and also household-centric for vulnerable communities. I think this is, and it takes time, it takes generations, but it also, you can see positive things happen in a very short time. I'm somebody who's worked in the field and also a former donor. I still advise a number of folks in the field and as donors. But I wanted to respond on one of the issues that I think is happening in the United States, and it's something that I worry about elsewhere without being able to comment so specifically, because since COVID, don't travel nearly as much.
And Maria, I don't actually think it's just a shock that it happened in the US.
Oh, not at all. Yeah, no. This was
that's a rise that we're just going to have. I'm also, I did like Yves' very early commentary from one woman in the program who said, if I have to choose between my husband and my savings account, I'll choose my savings account. For me, that's kind of like a different version of the man versus bear. You know, women will choose a bear over a man in the forest. Well, now we're going to actually go out and choose our bank accounts. I think that actually says a lot about what we haven't got right so far in these kind of programs. But
Katharina, sorry to interrupt you. May I just a very small comment, because I'm afraid I don't want to be misunderstood because of what I just.
I'm teasing you.
I know. When it comes to gender equality, we must not change the message. I believe we should make it more palatable. You know.
But that says something interesting about men. That says something interesting about
accusing
men. Women have
more,
unpalatable messaging all the time, but we have to like baby men.
If I may, I am in this huge dilemma.
She will disagree with me.
No. Can we hear from Maria Jose?
Yes, because I have told you in the panel that we have to promote an aspirational message. I do believe in that, but I also have this little dilemma because we as women don't have the responsibility to tell men what you're doing, it's wrong. And we also don't have to forget or just seem like inequalities and disproportionate effects of gender inequality are not affecting us and that they are privileging men. So we have to find this right balance between this is a reality, gender inequality exists, it affects mainly women, but we have to engage men because we cannot do that without them. So we have to find like the right balance between that, and we have to be careful to not fall into that false narrative that we as women have to teach men what they may do. So it's challenging. I hope we together someday find the answer, but yes, we have to have those two scenarios on mind.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. We're coming to the end. So I'm going to summarize what I took away, and then I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give us what the one message they would like us to leave with. So what I took away is that the most important changes that women say these programs for men's engagement need to aim for, if I'm summarizing what all of you said, is material changes. So Yves, you talked about access to more assets, to credit, to being a full economic citizen. Cognitive change. So I think it was, sorry, I can't remember who said it. I wrote it down, but cognitive change, like what does he learn and put into practice? But also, one of you mentioned, what does she learn about confidence, about her rights and her access and opportunities? So there's material, cognitive. Then Wessel talked about relational change, or the relational aspect of all of this work. And I mean, your son in that intergenerational piece was an example of, maintaining the concept of the value of relational, of gender in a relational way. And then the fourth one was perceptional change, when we talk about aspirational in the future, that individuals and families want to be able to see and envision a more positive future. So I think for me, that were kind of like the four themes that came together. But I wanted to ask each of you, what's one thing you would like us to leave with? I'm gonna, Yves, can I give your one thing to Maria Jose to say? Is that okay? Since
of course.
So I want to start with Maria Jose, but I thank you, Yves, and it's not because I'm differing in opinion with you, it's just I'm time managing. So can I start with Maria Jose? What is one thing you would like us to leave with?
Working with men is necessary, but we cannot forget that women have been fall behind for many times. So the goal must be women's equality, gender equality, sorry. So we have to work with them, but not forget that women do face extra barriers to achieve that.
Brilliant, thank you. And Wessel?
So in our survey on the state of American men, we found that men who had the poorest scores on gender equality attitudes had the best sense of purpose and the clearest sense of direction in their life.
Whoa, that's scary.
Yes, and I think that's some of the appeal and the status that goes with that, as could explain some of the dynamics we've been talking about. Here where I live, there's an idea called Ubuntu, grounded in the idea that I am because you are. And I think the I am because you are, I think the challenge for us is to have men understand that they can find purpose in care and in relationships.
Thank you. Alfred, in a couple of sentences, what do you want people to take away from this conversation in relation to specifically the $10 Spark campaign?
Yeah, thank you very much, Katharina. So I would say that, by inspiring men to be sparks for change who champion women's income growth, agency, and resilience, what we are seeing is that families are becoming stronger. Once families are becoming stronger, communities and economies are also getting stronger. So I invite you to join us by becoming a sponsor for the Spark for Change. And in so doing, you become a spark yourself. And your support will help our goal to reach 100,000 men as sparks for change, which ultimately will increase household income by 50%. Thank you.
And Alfred or Kathleen, are we going to send out some information about how to do?
Yeah, there's something in the chat box already, just getting people's attention to that. Amelia just put that up. And then, yes, we will include that when we send out the email with the recording. Sure.
Brilliant. So thank you all very much. Thank you, panelists. Yves, Maria Jose, Wessel, Alfred, and I'm sorry that we have
lost Zubaida earlier.
Lost Zubaida. But thank you all very much. Thank you for your time. I've really enjoyed these conversations and learning more. Thank you, Renata, Anne-Marie, Sophie, Amelia, Russell, Princia, and Rebecca and Valerie for joining us. Did I say everybody's name? I hope so.
I think you got there, yeah. And thank you, Katharina, as always.
Joining us. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about how this pans out, what kind of change you get to see. And of course, learning more just about all of the work that your organizations are doing, which is going to change the world and make it a place that we're all a part of and all want to and all long to see, really. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Have
Thanks,
a good
everyone.
evening,
Bye-bye.
afternoon.
Bye-bye.